Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Gather around. Come close. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to New York Live Arts. My name is Jamil Gustavo. I'm the producing associate here in Humanities and Engagement, and it's really a pleasure and honor to welcome you all to our Come Early conversation. This is, in fact, the season finale of our Come Early series, so it's great to see such a wonderful turnout. We have a really excellent panel, if you will, today. We have William Petroni, who is a former Pam Tanowitz dancer, currently working in the museum world. He has an extensive biography that you're more than welcome to read in our little program when the door is open. I guess most of note, he is the studio manager of the Oak Twins, who are with us this evening, so that's really awesome. And then we have Dan Siegler, a fellow Bennington alum, actually, and composer, has a long, extensive history of working with Pam, and we will have the honor of hearing his work this evening. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome William and Dan.
Thank you, and welcome. As previously mentioned, my name is William Petroni, and I am a former company member. I started with Pam in 1993 and retired from the company in 2007. Thank you. So we're here to have a little chat about collaboration. Pardon my glasses and reading my questions. I want to sound articulate. As introduced, Dan Siegler is a composer and a producer. He is also a 2009 Bessie Award winner for Be in the Gray. He's also a studio owner and, as mentioned, a graduate of Bennington College. So, to get our terms straight and to know what we're talking about, Dan, what is collaboration to you?
It's funny, the word collaboration has, my first thought is a negative one. I think about my parents mentioning to me the various European countries who collaborated with the Nazis in World War II. I'm assuming that you're not referring to that kind of collaboration. So my first thought is always like, collaboration, is it good for the Jews? Collaboration to me, I guess, is really when two artists come together, trusting each other enough to attempt to make something together, and to some degree subsuming their own egos, which are usually fairly high and strong in an artist's life, in order to create something kind of better than what they would create individually.
Great. I would have to concur. When you compose, how do you start? And is it any different when you collaborate?
It's funny, I spend my whole life sort of not answering these questions. I think my whole life is geared around not answering the mysteries of these questions, but I will attempt to. When I start to write without a collaborator, it can be just a sound that comes to me, a little snatch of a melody that comes to me, some particular sound that appeals to me. I'm not a purist when it comes to sound. I can be sort of turned on by the sound of a video game or the sound of a beautiful cello. Those things actually kind of go together for me. In fact, in the score tonight, there's some cello and there's some microphone, mic'd video game sounds. It can be, if it's a song-related thing, it can be just a lyric that pops into my head. A lot of times I get ideas when I'm walking down the street. Something about the rhythm of walking maybe pushes them out. In the old days, I'd have to walk with a little pen and paper, but now I have my iPhone and I can write stuff down on my notepad. And then I guess in terms of, you know, how I start when it comes to collaborating, you know, that process has evolved over the years, but right now I like to get a quick snapshot of what it is that we're doing. I don't like to get too much information. Maybe the equivalent of like showing somebody a couple of Polaroids as opposed to like the entire slideshow of their trip to Africa. So I like to get just kind of a general, quick idea, and then I like to get to work. And then I like to take what I've done, bring it in, and see how it flies, or if it flies.
You just answered a whole bunch of other questions. Sorry. No, that's very good. Particularly with Pam, does she give you milestones? Does she say, this is the amount of time, just fill it? So particularly with Pam and your collaborations with her, and even more specifically with Spectators.
Well, with the Spectators, Pam was much more hands-on than she had been in the past. I think maybe, you know, the stakes were kind of high for this piece for her. It was also, I think, a piece that I was composing once I moved my studio into our home. So she was able to monitor the progress, which is not necessarily a good thing for me. She wanted me to listen to the scores of Georges Leroux from Godard's Contempt. She wanted me to listen to some Chopin that she was particularly interested in. She had a lot of things that she wanted me to watch or listen to. And I sort of good-humoredly accepted that stimulus, but also ignored it at the same time, somehow. And I think all of it found its way into the score, but not in any way that would be recognizable.
So more of like a tone or a color as opposed to a quote or a note or a line?
You know, I think I sort of said to myself, you know what, I'm just going to get her off my back. And I'm going to throw in a little quote. Here's a little quote from the Contempt score. It's literally like one chord. And no one would ever recognize it, but I just listened to the score, grabbed the chord, threw it in, and that was that. With the Chopin piece, there was a little snatch of a melody that I threw in, and it actually got to a point where it was stopping me from the process that I normally have, which is just to go, just to create. So I was like, you know what, let me get past this because it's actually preventing me from moving forward. So I threw in a little Chopin quote, I threw in a little song and dance, I threw in a little, Georges Leroux, and then I moved on to the remaining 28 minutes of the score.
How long is your score?
Yeah, it's a rather personal question, isn't it?
It's something like
how long is your score? It is roughly 28 minutes.
This is your 13th collaboration with Pam. Started with rubbernecking in 1994, Spectators in 2013. I would assume your process has changed, as you perhaps just alluded to, but can you flesh that out a little bit?
Sure.
What was it like, and how has it changed?
Yeah. I think that when you start out making music for something, for some reason Bugs Bunny cartoons pops into my head right now. I think I watched way too many Bugs Bunny cartoons as a kid because every little action is punctuated in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. So I think that my cues came from what I used to do. Like I'm thinking about 1994, which I can barely remember. I used to feel like I had to some degree, emphasize specific movements at specific times. So at 5 minutes and 3 seconds, when a dancer goes like this, there has to be some sort of swoosh to emphasize that. And then at 10 minutes and 14 seconds, when there's a little foot thing, I'll do a little cute little sound effect there. And I think that it's a very sectional approach. I think even Pam's work was very, and you can speak to this, being her, her first male dancer, having been in this piece, Rubbernecking. You had the, I remember you driving a car. Like Pam's choreography, people who know it, can you imagine someone holding a steering wheel and actually, driving a car with a bunch of kids that they're squatting, in the back seat? It's very literal, very, and so I think that she certainly would never do anything like that now. It becomes much more abstract, I think. You have to. So I no longer feel compelled to punctuate the action in the same way that I once did.
And has her involvement or her direction or her directive or the place that she would start with you with the score, has that changed? Is she more involved, less involved? Or is that about each individual work?
I think that's evolved. At first, I would come to rehearsal, I would be at every rehearsal. I'd bring in a minute here, a minute there, just to check to see if it worked. That evolved into me coming to less rehearsals, bringing in 4 or 5 minute chunks. At a certain point, it became like you do what you do and I do what I do, which I don't think, and I think that went too far to the sort of Cage Cunningham, place where I don't think we work that well when we're totally unconnected. So I think that we sort of have brought the process back towards connectivity to some degree, but it's still, it's still not nowhere near the intense closeness that it used to be, which is positive for the music and for the dance.
Do you want to know what the work means to Pam or what she's getting at? Or do you just take your cues visually?
That's a good question. Well, I think that people, I've heard people who will look at an abstract painting or sit through some abstract film say about dance that they don't understand it, because they don't understand what it means. What's the literal? People take meaning in a literal way. What is it about? I don't think that Pam's work is about anything literally. It's not like this is the piece she did about Abe Lincoln. It's like there's no. That's not where she's coming from. I think of modern dance as like this is her unconscious speaking through the bodies of amazing dancers. And you either connect to the way they move and the way that she's showed them how to move, or you don't. But so, yeah, I don't want to know, even if it does have a specific meaning to her, I don't really want to know. She might want to tell me, but ultimately I don't really want to know. If I have to know, I'll ask. I'll accept the knowledge, but I will not seek out the knowledge.
This is a very layered and complex score with many varied sounds and instruments. Did you take cues from the choreography and Spectators specifically for the instrumentation? So for the particular instruments that you chose?
No, it's never like, okay, Melissa's dancing, therefore I will use a trumpet because Melissa equals trumpet and Dylan equals cello. And, it's not a sort of, each person is sort of assigned a color or a tone.
As is very traditional creative dance scores.
Is it? Okay, then I'm not, then I don't do it that way. I like to keep, there's going to be moments when the dancers are dancing fast and the music is very slow. There's going to be moments where the music is, very slow. The dancers are dancing fast. It's not a literal assigning of tones and colors to particular movements. I think when I was younger, I used to fall into the trap more often. I think it's sort of a sign of insecurity in a way, to feel like you have to punctuate to that degree. But I went to a rehearsal. I like to come to rehearsal with maybe 5 minutes of music just based on the title. Even the title, The Spectators, got me thinking, something sort of, formal and processional and, I don't know. For some reason, trumpet popped into my head, and I was like, let's see what happens.
And that was my next question.
Okay.
Trumpet.
Yes.
To my ears, that's a new sound for you, perhaps, in dance scores.
Yeah, I've never actually composed for trumpet, and over the past 4 or 5 years up until the score, I sampled horns. I went through a period of being a little bit too in love with my sampler, and I would grab some Count Basie, band solos, Duke Ellington things, and I would sort of, mess with them and change the tonality in the studio so that you wouldn't necessarily know what it was. So I was drawn to the sound of the horn, but I never actually composed for the horn. And I also made use of a technology this time, which I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to technology. I'm not phobic of technology, but I always just learn enough to do what I need to do. I don't ever go beyond that. So the technology has been available for probably 15 years to, play notes on a keyboard, a MIDI keyboard, and have those notes be printed out as a score. But for some reason, I never used it. So this time I just started going, playing little trumpet lines with my MIDI keyboard and started printing them out, and pretty soon I had just a ton of parts. Brought in a guy named Joe Ankowitz, who's a really excellent trumpet player, and he knocked them out, and they all kind of came together and made sense, so yeah.
Which leads me to my next question. How is this score unique for you as an artist, as a composer, in addition to the use of the trumpet?
In addition to the use of the trumpet, it is the most orchestrated thing I've ever done, even though it sounds kind of freeform, which I think my music tends to sound sort of like, well, you just threw a bunch of stuff together, I don't know what people's interpretation of it is, but it's actually extremely written out and regimented. You create a framework, and then you make sure no one can see the framework or hear the framework. That's sort of my compositional style. I don't. So it appears as if sounds are being made, but they're actually being made on a grid. You just can't see the grid.
No. You and I recently spoke of art being truly crafted in the editing process.
Oh, yes.
Regardless of an artist's medium. Can you talk about that a little bit? What is your editing process like? Is it an adding or a subtracting process? And what was the editing process like for the Spectators?
I think that when you're a young artist, you believe that everything that comes out of you is perfect as it is. And to be told that you have to rewrite it, that you have to sculpt it, that you have to, it's actually most evident in some of the work that I do with singer-songwriters, where it's like, here's a song, and then I have to tell them sort of what's wrong with it. Like it's got 7 different choruses and 3 different verses and 5 different bridges, and it's, and that's an extreme example, but I think that, and I understand that because when you create something, you feel in that moment like you've done something really beautiful, and it makes you very happy. So to have someone tell you, it could be better. You could trim this edge here and, tuck this in there and make it stronger is actually really challenging. And I think that the best artists are the ones that realize that the betterment of the piece, to me, in fact, it's reached the point where the act of creation is not even writing. I don't consider that writing. I just consider that like, I just woke up with an idea. It's like when you write you wake up and you keep a dream journal, and you write some amazing movie idea, and then you look at it when you wake up and you're like, that's ridiculous. That's not creation to me. creation is not, for me, the moment when you have the idea. Creation is the moment after that, when you shape the idea.
I mean, the more we are discussing this, the more I think about Pam's process, the more it seems like you guys are really well suited for each other in that you seem to approach creation in a very similar way. You seem to also approach the notion of either narrative or abstraction in a very similar way. And you also both seem to layer in a similar way. Is that?
Well, I mean, it's been a 18-year, however long it's been, creative experience working with and for Pam. So I think that we've definitely inherited things from each other. I think it would only be natural that we, hopefully, that we would. I think that, you know, Pam likes to put things in a place right where you expect them to go and then change it. It's like right on the edge of what you would expect, and then it's gone. And I don't know how she does that. I don't know that much about choreography. I only know what I know. But I like to do that too. I like to, you know, you'll hear in the score tonight, there'll be a few little like one-time only events, what I call them. They just happen once. There's a little a moment where a drum kit comes in and then it's gone. But you have to figure out what's disruptive and what's sort of just can be part of the flow. Not everything can go in. And you have to trust your own taste level to be able to discern what makes it and what doesn't.
Sure. It's like Chanel said, before you go out, stand in front of the mirror and take one thing off. Which of course is confusing because Deanna Freeland said, darling, if you can hang something on it, do. So somewhere in between those two things.
I live by those words.
I'm sure you do. When you collaborate with Pam, your work is often woven into a larger score, so it isn't just your composition. What is that like? Do you consider the other works that create the larger score when you are composing, and does Pam ask you to do that?
She's never asked me to consider the other works that she is using. Obviously, you know, she has an hour of music. In the past, it's like I was saying, it's been much more sectional. She'd have like a Cheap Trick song, and then she'd have like 10 minutes of my music, and then she'd have, I mean, I can't imagine Pam making music to a Cheap Trick song anymore. Did Beastie Boys when you were with the company? You gotta start somewhere. Sorry, lost the thread. What was the question?
Considering the other score, so essentially
yes, I have no, she's never asked me to consider them. I've never considered them. Maybe I ought to be more sensitive to them. Actually, what's kind of interesting is when things sort of work. I think there's sort of an unintentional connection between Annie Gosfield's score, which you'll hear on the second half of the evening tonight. At a certain point, there's a recorded track of strange kind of sound effects that get piped in over an unbelievable cello solo. And so my music also contains lots of little sort of effects. Mine are more digital or video gamey sounding. Hers are more like street sounds, industrial sounds. But I think that it actually unintentionally winds up bringing the music together so that it feels more cohesive. So that was kind of fun and interesting to have happen by accident.
And to my ear, this is the most cohesive score I've heard for a work of hers. And at the same time, the kind of disparate nature of the score in the past has always worked for the choreography. It always seemed to be two layers of essentially the same.
I mean, I think that ultimately, you know, I would go see Merce Cunningham's work, and it didn't matter what the music was. You know, it could be Sonic Youth, it could be some guy shaking a bunch of, you know, screws with a microphone, you know, stuck on it. It didn't make a difference. It was still Merce Cunningham's choreography it still made sense. It still ended where it was supposed to end. I was always amazed, like, yes, of course that's the ending. For no reason. It's not like da 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 da, but it just made internal sense. So, you know, ultimately the choreography is what the choreography is, and you know, the music, it doesn't ultimately matter. I mean, obviously it matters. It helps if you're drawn to it. It helps the dancers to feel connected to what they're doing. I would actually love, I don't know, for you as a dancer, you know, in a way I'm sure it's easy to dance to something with a regimented beat, but that's not really what modern dance is about. So I'm sure you've had the experience of dancing to like Philip Glass, where it's like repetitive arpeggios, but you've also had the experience of dancing to something completely abstract that has no foothold.
So that requires an internal understanding of the rhythms inherent in the movement,
right?
And that's the score that I would have. Pam's work is often wildly abstracted, and it has an internal rhythm to it, but it's rarely a 6 and an 8 and a 4. So if you can get it in your bones, then it's an internal.
Yeah, you have to find your own internal clock to what the thing is, even if there isn't a discernible time signature.
Right. That always, of course, had Pam telling me faster, faster, faster.
Yeah, well, these dancers work hard, man. I mean, it's just, the work gets more and more challenging, the dancers get better and better, and it's, you guys are all in for a treat.
Yeah, I'm glad I retired when I What and or who are your musical influences, and do you consider yourself working in, or at least addressing, a particular tradition of either music or composition?
I truly love all forms of music. There's not, most people have one sort of idiom that they just can't tolerate. You're not a big fan of country, I remember, right?
Yeah.
I remember you telling me, like,
yeah.
I mean, I love country music. I love Hank Williams and, you know, the Carter family, and I love George Jones, who recently passed away. And, you know, I love funk and R&B. I love James Brown. I love George Clinton. I love hip hop. You know, Run DMC, and I love Kanye West, and I love, you know, Drake. I mean, you know, a huge. So it's like there isn't something that's a deal breaker for me, except sometimes like the music that you hear in a cab coming back from Brooklyn. You know, whatever that stuff is kind of drives me crazy. But I think that the Berlin trilogy that Bowie and Eno did, particularly the album Low, was a huge eye-opener for me, or ear-opener for me. The instrumental stuff on that record, I think, is just as gorgeous as the vocal stuff. And then as I started to do this kind of work, you know, Pam exposed me to John Cage, and Henry Cowell was a huge influence, particularly the Alien Harp piece. And I actually had the courage for the first time to play the inside of my piano on this, which he did on this for this score. And then in terms of a tradition, you know, I'd like to aspire to a Cage Cunningham type of tradition. Obviously, they're like the sort of shining beacon on the hill, you know, working with your partner is, you know, I think there's a long history of that. There's also probably, you know, some kids graduating from college right now who are, you know, eating in a bar like Pam and I did, and about to, you know, do some work together. So I guess being part of that feels good.
A fluff question.
Okay.
What was it like to win Bessie?
Oh. It was cool. I mean, you know, the last time I won something before that was like Best Intermediate Sailor, you know, in camp. So it was a long time.
It was like very special.
It was a long wait.
It was the entire ensemble won.
Yes, I mean, and I wouldn't have won it had I not been part of the. I mean, everybody won that year for all of their contributions to Be in the Gray with Me, which was done here. This is Pam's return to this space as Nyla. But it was a great night, and it's very exciting to be acknowledged. So,
And you were in very good company.
absolutely, it's always good to be in good company. As I am right now.
Do you have a question in mind that I haven't asked?
I'm good now.
Okay. And I'm also wondering if there are any questions that anyone else might have that I failed to ask.
I thought it's very interesting to hear how you work. You're sort of working in parallel with the plan. What's the time when it all comes together, and how long do the dancers have to be rehearsing with the full score?
Well, Pam rehearses with the dancers for a long time. She likes to have like a year. I think this piece, if I'm not mistaken, they worked on for about a year, but I had nothing to do with it for a very long period of time. And then she also had already decided to work with Annie Gosfield's score, which you'll hear performed live by the unbelievable Flux Quartet, they're like animals, they're amazing. So I was brought in pretty late in the process. It started out as maybe 10 minutes of music. It changed to 15, then 20, then 25. It just kind of kept going. So the dancers had way longer to acclimate themselves to Pam's movement style, which I think takes some time to learn. It's very specific. So I would say it took me about 3 or 4 months. It took them about a year.
And then how long did they work with the full score?
Like my score, you mean? I was finishing it up 2 weeks ago. So it got to
fresh.
Yeah. I don't like to be working that long. I would have loved to have been done earlier. It just did not happen. When I saw the performance last night, I saw how she had just started to have the dancers kind of tuck into little moments that they literally had not done the night before. But now I can feel them sort of inhabiting it. I think as a dancer, sure, you'd love to have a score as early as you possibly can, but I was not able to accommodate that.
For me personally, when I did dance, it was really mostly about having a thorough understanding of the interior of the movement. Right? If I could have that, then similar to Keisha Cunningham, the score was always kind of in the background. If there were milestones, if there was a place where you kind of had to be, or there was a gesture that aligned, that's one thing. But again, if you have the interior score,
Yes.
because Pam's movement is really rhythmic.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably, I'm sure that's true, but then of course it helps if you have something that you enjoy. Like if it's, and then a week before you're about to dance, it's like, we're going to use the sound of a toilet flushing over and over again. It might be a little bit challenging. So,
But you give yourself over.
Yes.
Is there another question?
I have time for maybe one more question or comment.
I did want to acknowledge one person who's in the audience, if I may. Sarah Green, who is a founding member of the company and was with Pam at Ohio State in 1840-something. And was in the company for many years, and it's very good to see you. Sarah. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up.
Thank you
Thank you all for joining us very much.